That's it. Well, guys, say hello. Those of you that are on, tell us your name and where you're from in the chat. I'd like to at least do that. While you're doing that, there's Jay. We'll go ahead and get we'll get Jay oriented, and there he is.
Hi. Hey, Robin. Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. I tell you. Where are you in? You're in California, aren't you? Close
I
to your home.
am.
Well,
I'm
guess
like,
what?
yeah, I'm 50
I'm
miles
here
north of
too.
the Golden Gate Bridge. Oh, are you?
You're where? At the
I'm
Golden
about an
Gate
hour
Bridge?
north of San Francisco.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm in California. I'm in Anaheim. I just landed about 30 minutes ago, and
Welcome.
we were rushing to get somewhere where we could do this. We could do this call. Well, Leanne, why don't you go ahead and get us started? And is it time yet? No, I'll give them a couple more minutes. Jay, it looks like you're growing a beard. You got a little
It
scruffy thing going
depends.
there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It pretty
Is
much
that something
depends on
new?
the day and how much time I had to shave or not. So, yeah, today is beard day.
Okay, I got you.
That's funny.
Kind of funny.
Because
What?
I'm time blind. So Robin calls me up about 10 minutes ago and said, you know, today is the day for this presentation, don't you? I'm like, oh, really? So I raced around to find a charger for my phone in downtown Sebastopol, and miraculously, I found it, and I'm good to go.
You're here. Yeah, we didn't want to. I didn't want to tell everybody that, but yeah, Jay. I called Jay because we used to get on a little bit early and try to get video and mic and everything going, and he's like, hey, how you doing? I said, yeah, I'm doing good. And I said, he says, I'm about 40 minutes away from home, and it was like, okay. And he said, oh, I thought that was next week. Well, I've never heard that expression, Jay, but I believe you are time blind. I
I
believe
believe I am. I know I am.
all right. All right. But we
Believe it
love
or
you
not.
anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, it comes with gifts. You know, everyone has a gift. So I don't know what the gift is yet, but yeah, apparently time blind is at least good for spontaneity because I present a lot better when I haven't prepared any kind of script.
I know that about you. I last time you were on stage, that was your forte. You didn't want a script. You work well without it.
Yeah, this new minder of mine is trying to get me to work off a script, and there's just no way she's ever going to get me to do that.
All right. Well, I've got a few talking points. So after we open things up here, after Leanne gets introduced, we can get started and do a little bit. So Leanne, you want to kind of do a little housekeeping up front? Leanne, are you there?
I believe she said she had a member call.
Oh, she's on a call. All right. Well, everyone, I'm Leanne Fleischer, and welcome to the call. No, I'm not, obviously, but I'll go ahead and do her thing. She just wanted to come on and say welcome to everybody and remind everyone that tomorrow we're going to have Scott Banta on talking about tiny house villages. He's building a tiny house village. He's a developer. He's been a developer for, I don't know, 40 years, but he's developing tiny house villages right now. Forgotten what it's called, Dream something. But anyway, we're gonna be on that. I'm gonna be on that call too, and really excited about the Thursday call with the inspectors. We always have a great time talking to our inspectors and some of the things that they've seen. And so if you have any inspector questions, then please save those for Thursday. That being said, I want to introduce everyone to Jay Schaefer. He is, we call him the father of tiny houses because he was kind of the first one that made it to social media, made it famous. Everybody knows that picture of this little A-frame 70 square foot tiny house with a with a stained glass window in it. I guess it was a stained glass window. So anyway, and so that was how well, say hi to everyone and then tell us how many years ago that was that you were living in that one, Jay.
Oh, good. Thanks, Robin. I built my first house. Well, I finished it up in 1999, which sounds ancient now, but I moved in at that time and had written a book while constructing it about the weirdness of American laws that prohibit safe, efficient, affordable housing. So I started looking into that, and so I released an article, a book actually, and a few articles about that subject, about the weirdness of American housing laws, and released pictures of the house at the same time, and that eventually evolved into what's now known as the tiny house movement.
Yeah, isn't that
And
incredible?
I've been living small ever since.
And so you back then were concerned about the housing laws, and that's what we want to talk about today is codes and standards and the laws that are out there. And toward the end of our time together, I want to really dig deep into the Colorado, the statute that passed this last July. But before we get into that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, now you lived in that house for a couple of years, I guess, and you had to move it from, I remember you moved it from one place to, was it Sonoma County, California? Tell us that.
That's right. I actually lived in that first house for about 5 years in Iowa City, where I built it. I lived in my own. I basically lived in my own backyard because I purchased a a site-built 300 square foot house and rented that out. And to do things legally, I had to camp out, quote unquote, in my own backyard for that 5 year period. And from there, I moved to Sonoma County, where I figured the Bay Area is the heart of the housing crisis. And I was right. It's really bad here. And I've been, this is a good place from which to actually work on these issues.
Okay. Well, did you have to move or did you choose to move? Did somebody say you got to go, or how did that play?
I guess that's a subtle distinction. I had gotten engaged to a surfer girl, somehow managed to meet her in Iowa City, and she would like to move to one of the coasts, somewhere along the coast of the United States, so she could surf. I chose the most expensive, sharkiest waters around, and that's how I landed here. It was kind of required for the marriage, although the marriage didn't go through, but it did land me in what seems to be the right place.
All right. And so tell us a little bit about your perspective of what the tiny house laws were then and are now, and what do you say, how do you say we need to change? What needs to change in our tiny house world right now?
Yeah, well, tiny houses in the beginning anyway weren't really designed to be tiny. They're really just designed to be efficient. And when you design efficient, you tend to end up with a very small structure, assuming the needs of the occupant are normal or minimal. So what's happened is that the tiny houses, all things being equal, a tiny house is more safe, efficient, and healthy, affordable, and whatnot than some of our housing laws are in the United States. So the housing laws are supposed to actually prescribe those things, but the laws, when it gets down to the nitty gritty, they prohibit some of those things, which explains why a lot of interesting politics and civil disobedience have followed tiny houses ever since. So the laws haven't caught up yet. And when it comes to these housing codes, they're all a little weird because they're all a little, they tend, well, at least most of them tend to, oddly enough, prohibit really efficient, affordable design. And there are reasons for that, mostly profit and some political things around keeping poor people out of jurisdictions. But tiny houses houses have essentially brought that to the fore. We've changed some laws, and we're changing more. And as far as I'm concerned, a set of regulations or standards for tiny houses would basically be a set of standards for all housing, when it comes to minimum sizes or minimums in terms of square foot of safety and efficiency and affordability.
What's your take on, let's just say, one item? Let's take the composting toilet. What's your take on the composting toilet?
Well, it's interesting you should ask because several friends of mine have been focusing on that issue here in Sonoma County for the past year and have finally now pushed through legislation that allows for composting toilets. The codes, depending on what code you're abiding by, if you're abiding by any, well, let's just say the IRC, and the International Residential Code is the most widely used code in America for housing. And that code does require a flush toilet, but it doesn't require that flush toilet be used, and it doesn't prohibit a composting toilet from being installed. So it's kind of funny how the loopholes that the tiny house movement has presented, like living on wheels to get around dumb laws restricting efficiency, and for that matter, claiming to wear diapers to get around a toilet requirement, or not using the flush toilet and just using a bucket on the same property. Those are all legal ways to get around laws that aren't actually in line with preemptive constitutional laws. So they're all forms of civil disobedience. And when it comes to tiny house workarounds, they're pretty much as weird as the laws are themselves.
I know in my area, which is Florida, the state health department regulates wells and septics and all of that kind of thing, and they do allow composting toilets in Florida. However, they get you on the food waste in your kitchen sink. They said, well, you still have to have a septic because you're putting organic matter into the because you got food particles in the kitchen sink. So
Right.
I don't know where that's going to land, but that's what they're saying here in Florida.
Well, it would help, if it's as if these municipalities and our country as a whole can't see the precedents of other municipalities or countries that have been allowing for such things or even requiring such things for decades or centuries. It's like the testing has been done. We really don't have to go through this every time with every different jurisdiction. It's,
Right.
we just spent a year proving that composting toilets are fine, and that's been proven long ago. But if Florida needs an example, we got all the documentation you need right here.
We got, you mentioned a 5-gallon bucket. Yeah, that's really the most primitive composting toilet, but there are actually composting toilets out there like Separate and Nature's Head that separate the liquid from the solid so that it doesn't smell and it vents to the outside. So when, I don't know, maybe you could, I don't know who's on here, but if you guys are thinking, ooh, composting toilets, it's, we had one in one of our tiny houses. I never used it, but I know a lot of people that have used them, and they say they don't smell, they're not bad. You can take the liquid and I think it's half and half, mix it with water and use it to water your trees and things like that. And then the question was, well, what do you do with the waste, the solid waste? And one of our tiny housers called the county, and they said, well, just put it in your trash. You put your dirty diapers in there, don't you? Just bag it up and put it in your garbage with the regular garbage. And so that's what they were told to do. Or you could actually, believe it or not, use it for compost, right?
Yep, that's ideal when we can reuse these things.
Yeah.
Actually, what they've come to in Sonoma County, not everything's been finalized yet, but it seems that we're heading towards allowing for composting toilets and, for that matter, carry out septic. So to be essentially like that, you just carry out your own waste, and presumably they would have a place you could take it, or you can always put it in the trash because, like you said, dirty diapers go in the trash. There's nothing wrong with that in terms of law.
Yeah. What about wells? Do you have any difficulty getting water in, drilling wells in your area?
Yeah, I live in a really drought-prone area, which makes it extra ridiculous that it's taken us this long to get the composting toilet thing through. But I don't think we have any dire problems with wells yet and water, at least not in my area. Although California in general, especially down there south where you are, Robin, most of the water comes in from other sources. So, and as that's drying up, it's becoming more problematic every day. I don't know if you've seen anything on Lake Mead lately, but it's like, yeah, there's not enough water to go around at this point.
Right. No, I've heard that the water supply is like you said, no pun intended, drying up. One of the things that I had a tenant that moved into one of our houses, and she wanted to make sure that it had its own well. We had a well there. We did have a well. It went down to the aquifer. This particular well that it was 300 and something feet, and she wanted that house because it had a well. Apparently, the city water has chemicals in it that they treat the water with, and one of the chemicals is lye. They also put chemicals in there so that it's not acidic anymore. And so she didn't want to have to drink city water, even though the health department says it's okay to drink. She didn't want to have anything to do with it because of all the chemicals. What's your feeling on that, Jay?
Yeah, that extends beyond water too. I mean, indoor air pollution is much worse than outdoor air pollution typically, with American building materials and housing being what it is. So it's funny because to be healthier in your immediate built environment, you really basically have to live outside the codes or find some kind of loophole that allow you. My big thing lately is my thought is, why doesn't everybody just sleep like Michael Jackson style in a little toxin-free sleeping cylinder? That's around here we have real fire problems. They're a real threat. So a fireproof little structure in the backyard could go a long way in terms of safety and health for that matter.
You mean just a small structure in the
Yeah, it
fireproof
could be.
structure?
Yeah, it could be any. It could be any size, all the way down to just a sleep, like one of those Japanese hotel-sized modules or capsules. But yeah, it is funny to think that to actually have a safe, efficient, affordable structure, you do have to look. Well, the code I should make it clear that the code does allow for these things. It's just that the code is written in such a way that even enforcers have a really hard time interpreting it and understanding that what ultimately is legal is that a structure be safe, healthy, and preferably affordable and efficient. And if it's non-code compliant, then it's still legal because you can't really refuse something that beats the code.
That meets code, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. So let's codes and standards for tiny houses. What's your what's on the horizon? Is there anything that on the horizon for tiny houses, some official codes and standards?
Yeah, I know a couple groups have been working on codes for tiny houses. Interestingly, the folks who make the most prominent housing codes have been really fighting it because those codes are designed for profit and exclusionary purposes. But it seems that at least the ASTM standard people, I know that you're familiar with them, Robin.
Yeah.
Janice and all are getting it through now, are actually going to be working on some new, like better, some revisions to what's going on right now legally. which is great.
Yeah, basically, guys, what's happened is there's ASTM, which is American Standard Testing Methods, has committees out there, and there's an existing committee that has agreed to take on a subcommittee for tiny houses on wheels. They meet in October and April, and hopefully the tiny house world will be able to put together some standards, and they don't follow the code cycle like IRC does. IRC is the next code cycle to get into with IRC is 5 years away in 2027. So if there was any standards or codes to be changed for tiny houses, it's too late to get into the 2024. But if you are interested in getting those codes changed, add to Appendix Q or adjust it or something like that, I think it opens this January. You can start putting stuff in there for that. So I guess there's the existing codes, IRC, and there's the HUD code for manufactured housing. Those are two existing codes that say you can live in the home as a dwelling, live in it full time. And so that's what's been happening in our years, and for the last 40, 50, 60 years, as long as it's been going on, that's the way they've been doing and building houses. Then they haven't just been IRC. There was BOCA building code. There was CABO 1 and 2 family building codes. There was NFPA 5000, which was another dwelling code. But I think 49 states use a IRC with amendments for their building code right now. But tiny houses came into the world, and it's like, well, what are these? The building code officials didn't want to call it a dwelling, and the DMV didn't want to call it a vehicle, and the HUD didn't want to have anything to do with it. So for the last many years up until now, we've been just trying to figure it all out. So what's been happening in California with the ADUs?
Yeah. Well, California is about as bad as it gets in terms of the housing crisis. The Bay Area is ground zero, and worldwide for like messed up housing problems, and it's all a result. If you're looking for the true cause of the crisis, just look to the to American housing laws. They have this prescribed, they have prohibited affordable housing for a long time. They'll call something affordable housing, but yeah, that runs like $800,000 per unit sometimes. Sometimes gets that high out here in California. That's called affordable, and it has nothing to do with what most of us would call affordable. And along those lines, the same code has adopted terms like tiny house as legal terms in order to say, yeah, tiny houses are cool, just have to abide by the codes. And it's ridiculous because as it stands now, a tiny house would have to, for example, include something like 60 R's worth of insulation. That's about 10.5 inches worth of high efficiency polyiso insulation in a roof, which, by the time all is said and done, you you basically have a tiny hallway if you're trying to keep a house really small. So right. The appropriation, or I should say the co-opting of the term tiny house by codes and zoning is, don't be fooled. It's really, tiny houses are all about efficiency in the end. Words like sustainable and green are also about that. So, it's the International Code Council is pretty good at greenwashing, and that's what they're doing with this tiny house provisions right now. To make the codes truly efficient for tiny houses, we're going to have to actually look at what true efficiency looks like. 60 R's of insulation is not only inefficient because of the diminishing returns of insulation. The more the thicker it gets, the less you get out of it, and at a certain point you're actually being inefficient. But in fire country, that stuff also produces a lot of hydrogen cyanide gas, which is what the Nazis used to exterminate a lot of people in Nazi Germany. And so if you've smelled the smoke in California, you've probably inhaled a bit. You've probably gotten a touch of, or more than a touch of cyclone B poisoning, which is what the Nazis called it.
Wow, wow. Well, that's
Yeah.
not good. And in the ADU laws there in California, they have allowed some places like Fresno and San Luis Obispo, San Diego, LA. They are allowing you to put a tiny house on wheels in the side yard or the backyard, but it has to be built to the ANSI 119.5 standard, which is your park model standard. Now, in that park model standard, do you know what the R values are?
I think, well, last I heard there were 10, which is way more reasonable than, IRC standards. But I'm glad you finished this up because I totally wandered. I strayed from the answer to your question and you brought it right back. Yeah, California is allowing for ADUs and sometimes even tiny houses on wheels. But the problem with those codes you referenced, the RV standards, is officially still these days you can't, can only design and use an RV seasonally. So
Yeah,
it's not an enforceable law, but it does say that you can't live in your house year round.
and it's an outcropping of a housing crisis is what it amounts to, I think, because they need housing so badly that they're willing to allow a ANSI 119.5, and it's an R7 in the ceiling that's in that, and an R5 in the walls and the floors, and that's insufficient. I know we here at NOAA, we've upped that to an R13 in the walls and an R19 in the ceiling. And for a tiny house, a small space, 200 square feet, that thing that Jay was talking about, the diminishing returns, we lived in our 20-footer for 6 months, and our electric bill never went over $25 a month. So the idea that you need to up the insulation value. Now, in some northern states, I can agree with it. If it's an insulation value would probably help out in the real cold climates. But like Jay says, you do get a diminishing return. Now and I'm all for good insulation and energy savings and all of that. So yeah, the ANSI 119.5 is insufficient, but what's been happening is the housing crisis has forced county commissioners to really just cram it down the throat of the building code officials and saying, hey, building code official, you're going to allow somebody to live in a park model or quote unquote standard park model RV, even though it may not have all of the egress requirements of a dwelling. It may not have the insulation requirements and energy efficiency requirements, but that's what's happening right now. And like I've always said, we do need a standard or a code specific to tiny houses on wheels, because like Eric Fried said, it's trying to fit a round peg in a square hole when we're trying to meet and fit some of the current standards that we have in tiny houses into those standards. Jay, you're muted in case you didn't know. Okay.
I know. The only outlet I can find out here is in the midst of all these people. So I thought I'd better mute while I'm not talking. You made a good choice.
Oh, that's cool. I appreciate that. All right.
Yeah. Oh, and along those lines, I should just say that, California is actually, allowing for all sorts of ADU solutions now. What's happened is government used to be very much into the code, the IRC, because it behooved them, as it kept poor people out of the jurisdictions. But nowadays, the enforcement of those overreaching laws has actually created such a problem that government officials are now like, whatever it takes. Now they're just like looking at the problem and allowing for common sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you got homeless people living in tents all over the place. Anything's better than living in a tent, even if it's if it was originally, the cut standard was originally designed for seasonal or temporary housing. We're gonna let you live in it full time because the alternative is a tent on the streets.
Yeah, one perspective is, the code can't prohibit something that meets or beats what the code prescribes. And what the code is ultimately prescribed is tent cities, because it's unreasonable prescriptions have actually created the tent cities, because it's either all or nothing. You build a house that's really over the top in terms of your needs, or you live in a tent. And so right
Yeah,
now they're allowing for pretty much anything.
yeah, there's nothing in the middle, but between their big house or the tent. Yeah, no, I agree. I just I had a thought about something, and it'll come back to me in a minute. But I wanted to say, everybody that's on the call, if you do have questions for us, we're going to be taking some Q&As in just a minute here. So put your questions in the Q&A right at the bottom of your screen. And Jay, can you tell us the difference between building codes and zoning laws?
Yeah, I didn't even realize that the same agency that makes building codes, the IRC anyway, these days, also makes the zoning laws, which makes it all the more corrupt in the sense that, yeah, the zoning laws tell you where you can build a certain kind of structure, where you can't. And, so codes set up a bunch of categories. Codes and standards will divide houses into, let's say, manufactured housing, freestanding single family housing. And then zoning comes in to say, okay, only the most expensive kind of housing can go in town. All the rest goes out to the periphery. So, this was designed back in 1919 it started. And it's been going on ever since. And it's not working. Obviously, it's created a few little problems. And so zoning is just about how the parcel, a property can get used. And codes and zoning have worked together to make things very difficult in terms of common sense housing.
Yeah. So guys, if you're thinking about it, it's like this. The building itself has a building code to it. And if you get a building code passed, like we did here in Florida, in Brevard County, Florida, we got a building code passed that, you could build a tiny house to ANSI 119.5, but then where are you going to put it? Okay, so this is a tiny house. Where are you going to put it? That's the zoning department that tells you, you can put it in agriculture, or you can put it in a PUD, a planned urban or a planned unit development, or you can put it in a mobile home park, or an RV park. They tell you where you can put your tiny house, and the building department tells you how to build it, basically, whether you can live in it full time. You have to build it like this, or if you want to live, if it's going to be lived in temporary seasonal housing, then you can build it to one of the RV standards that are out there. So that's kind of, and once you got through one hurdle, you still got the other hurdle to go through. And Jay's exactly right that they call them NIMBYs, not in my backyard. That you have these guys that have houses, nice houses in subdivisions, and they don't want a tiny house on a lot next to them because they feel like it's going to bring the value of the tiny house down. And so what a lot of the zoning people are doing are clustering the tiny houses in cluster subdivisions or communities. And so I know that in Texas, Dallas, Texas, Terry Lathrop was able to get 13 tiny houses in his backyard on a 1 acre parcel of property by going before the county commissioner and showing him, here's the landscaping, here's where the parking is, and I want to put 13 tiny houses in. And so that's happening and more across the nation.
And where was that again? Or who was that? I'd like to Google that one, Robin.
That's Terry Lathrop, Lantrip. He's in Lake
Okay.
Dallas, Texas.
Terry Lathrop. Thank you.
Yeah, he had a 1 acre parcel of property with a house on it. So it already had well and septic and power. And it was a broken down house he couldn't live in, but it did have all the infrastructure. And so that's what he did with that property. And that's happening. All right. Before we open things up for Q&As, is there a, do you know anything about the Colorado statute that passed last July, Jay?
I know very little about it. I'm sure you know more than I do, Robin. I don't keep up with the details so much the day to day, but I know that that is something that it sounds like it will be changing or act as a precedent for further changes. Do you know, what do you know about it?
Yeah, well, I talked with a concerned person yesterday, actually, for about 45 minutes on it, who was very concerned about the bill. Basically, guys, what it's trying to do is, what can I say? All right, let me start out with RVs. RVs are considered vehicles, and vehicles are regulated by the Department of Motor Vehicle Administration. And because of unscrupulous car dealers and stuff over the years, vehicles have a lot of rules and regulation. And Jennifer Levini told us a lot about that. But one of the things that sticks in my mind is the Lemon Law. So if you have a vehicle like a tiny house and you're a manufacturer of your tiny house, under the vehicle rules, number one, you got to be registered as a manufacturer in the state, and you have to be your people that sell it. And you may, in some states, you can't be the dealer and the manufacturer, but you have to have a dealer that's going to sell your units, and they all have to be registered and insured and all these rules and regulations. But one of the things that really scared me was the Lemon Law. In the Lemon Law, it's either 2 to 4 times when you go out to repair something on the tiny house. You're a manufacturer, something goes wrong, you got a window that leaks. Let's just put it like that. You got a window that leaks, and you've been out there 2 to 4 times to fix it. If you can't fix it, if it's not fixed after that time, it's called the Lemon Law. You have to buy that house back and give them all their money back on that. So we don't want tiny houses to fit into the category of a vehicle and have to follow those laws. So what Colorado has done, because of a few mosquitoes on the wall that have taken advantage of selling the tiny houses, some manufacturers have done that. Now state of Colorado says, no, all right, we're going to come in, we're going to regulate. And they're the first ones that are really doing this. And what they're trying to do is to regulate it as a factory built or modular home. They want it to be under the modular laws. But the problem is, it's like I said, it's trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. The modular program doesn't work very well. So they've commissioned a 15-member task force to go over basically 5 things. They're mandated not to do it, but to consider, whatever consider means. Number one, it has to be affordable. And that's important. They wrote that in the statute, Jay, that they want whatever they come up with, they want to consider that they're affordable. So under the affordable umbrella, if you fall into a manufactured or a factory built house, a modular home, you've got to have a quality assurance man. You've got to have a factory. The factory has to be inspected. They have to go out and they have to look at 3 of your homes physically and make sure that you know what you're doing. And then they pop in and do inspections on these homes. So for the challenges, the second mandate is, okay, well, let's look at the 20 houses, the manufacturer that only builds 20 or less houses. And let's look at the DIY, the owner builder that builds his own house. And let's look at the custom builder that doesn't build the same thing every time. And then the last thing that they said, and consider that it should be movable. So those are the 5 things that they put in that statute, which I like those. I want them I wish they mandated it, but they said you just consider those things. But anyway, that's a good step in the right direction. And I was talking with David Tompos from ICCNTA about the modular inspection process and how it's going to raise the cost of a tiny house if we have to jump through all those hoops, the same as a Champion home or a Clayton home, because they build the same model, they mass produce it, and they just basically have an inspector there full-time in the factory inspecting their homes as they go along there. And so I proposed a little bit of a different way of keeping them affordable by doing the inspection process that NOAA does, which is, you know, it's a virtual inspection. You download an app into your phone if you're the manufacturer, and we inspect the house just like it was a site-built house. And I'm putting a little plug in for NOAA, but basically we inspect the house and every house is inspected, not just whatever you pop in and whatever's on the line. So every house is inspected. It's inspected in every stage of construction. And then we video and photo and inspector notes. So we create the file and we archive that file. So he said, you know, I wouldn't be opposed to having 2 inspection processes, one for the mass production, you know, Clayton homes and Champion homes, and one for the smaller manufacturer, the owner builder, and, you know, the custom builder of tiny houses. So hopefully my hope is that Colorado will blaze some trails here and allow remote inspections of modular homes and in that way make them affordable. So that's what I know about Colorado. They're mandated by next July to have the standards for tiny houses and the way that they're inspected for tiny houses rolled out into law. And then they have some grandfathered in ways to grandfather in houses that are already in there. So in a nutshell, that's what I know of the law.
Sounds like it should work. I'm always wary of any regulations on tiny houses because as an owner builder, you know, I know that I'd never build anything of inferior quality for myself. And for that matter, everything I design for other people would be, you know, greater quality than current codes allow. I guess the current codes are what scare me. But as long as they are actually allowing for all the things you speak of, it seems like it's good to go. I also sometimes wonder about something like a Section K, where, you know, this applies only to the industry and owner builders can pretty much do what they want as long as they're not going to sell their home within 3 or 5 years. That comes to mind. In any case,
Yeah.
I've had, you know, I have a bad taste in my mouth from an entire century's worth of very corrupt housing law. So that one sounds promising, and that could be a great precedent for the rest of the country, so long as it actually, yes, as long as they actually follow through on what their stated goals are.
Right. Do more than just consider these 5 things, but actually implement the 5 things.
Yeah, more like provisions than prohibitions. I like to think of it that way. Like we're providing for this, you know, and, you know, we are prohibiting houses that fall apart in the first, you know, year, because that's important too. Unless, of course,
Absolutely.
you are the builder, in which case you can do whatever you want, I would think.
In some areas you can, in other areas they do have the rules and regulations that come in, and it's coming, Jay, and everyone else on the call. They're coming. The rules and regulations, the laws are coming. What we want to do is we want to write our own laws. We want to have a hand in the writing of those laws so that they're effective and they do create an affordability that's not going to, you know, create something. What I heard in the Innovative Housing Showcase in Washington, D.C., that 30 to 35% of the cost of a home is red tape. You know, it's not the actual cost of the material and everything. It's all the red tape, the impact fees and the permit fees and all the fees that go with it. So
Yeah, when you're trying to design super efficient, you're considering every penny and every ounce of material and all the environmental degradation that's going to come from the wrong materials. when you get to those impact fees, which are far from efficient, it's a tough pill to swallow. So I'm hoping that something can be, resolved there too. 'Cause,
All right, last question and then we'll open it up. Let me see if I've got all my talking points. Well, not the last question. This is the second to the last question. Do you still have your book for sale?
Oh, thanks for asking. Now we get to plug my book. I get you. You're plugging my book. I really appreciate it, Robin. I forget to do that myself. But yes, I do. I am totally ill prepared, except I know how I can do this. If you want to buy the book that started the tiny house revolution, I do have 3,000 copies sitting under a tarp behind my house. So please just, I'm selling them, to you guys, they're usually like $40, but I'm selling them for 20 to people who are really into this stuff, which is include this audience. So send me $20 at, do you mind if I just give out my address? I guess I will.
No, go ahead, give it out.
Okay, that would be addressed to Jay Schaefer, Schafer, and my address is 732 Robinson Road, Sebastopol, California. Sebastopol 95472. Totally
All right.
Luddite way of doing this, but I guess that still can work sometimes.
Ian, can you put that in the chat there? Because
Thank you. That's
I
smart.
know that I won't. Can you say it again, Jay, real quick, so Leanne can do
Yeah,
that?
I'll say it real quick. Jay Schaefer, 732 Robinson Road, Sebastopol, California, 95472.
Maybe
hope
we
that
can
Fast.
maybe we can put that in an email that we send out afterwards, so people
Right.
will
All right.
have it.
We'll make it in an email, send it out.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that.
Oh, yeah.
I can't-
No.
yeah.
Yes, I got 732 Robinson Road. What was the city?
Sebastopol, Sebastopol.
And what about postage? What about postage, Jay?
Oh, postage? Oh, yeah, right. Well, I'll cover the postage with the 20, send me $20 and I'll cover that part. I don't think it's, if you're out of the country, that might be an issue. I'd contact you, but if you're in the United States, you shouldn't. It'll all work out. I'll get the book to you if you give me $20.
Yeah, make sure you send in a return envelope or, return address to where to send it to, so he can do
Yeah.
that. So yeah, no, that's,
Yeah, that's important.
yeah, absolutely. Last question. Where do you see the tiny house movement going? What's the future of the tiny house movement?
Well, I like to imagine at some point, the term tiny house will just be an adjective and a noun, because it really is. I mean, until it became a really perverse legal term, really what we're talking about, well, in my book, in the original tenets of the movement, tiny house is just any house in which all the space is being used and nothing's wasted and nothing's lacking. So tiny houses are just really efficient houses. And when it comes to efficiency, the number one thing to do is choose the right goal before you start doing whatever it is efficiently. So in my case, I would say livability is the goal. Try to tackle that efficiently. It all works out well. If your goal is to make money, you tend to make crap. I guess you could do both, but with that primary goal being livability, you can't go too far wrong.
Cool. All right, guys. Any questions, Leanne, before we wrap this up here?
Yes. I have a comment and 3 questions. And the first one is by our member, Matt Markle. He wants to know, what is the best thing to do to help pressure legislators to include tiny homes? And on a local level, who can we speak to get variances or exceptions or work towards getting it placed legally? Either one of you?
I got an answer or two, unless you want to go first, Robin.
No, you go ahead, Jay.
Okay, I've just spent the last year writing an article, soon to be released after my editor's done bulletproofing it, because there will be threats of litigation coming from a few entities who I have, it's necessary to expose. And in that article, I do explain that, preemptive laws, constitutional laws does allow for common sense housing. So what happens at the local level with the IRC anyway, is that code is written in a very confusing way. Ultimately, if an enforcer, a local enforcer, isn't allowing for safer, like options that are just as safe or safer than code compliant houses, they may be acting under color of law, which is a huge no-no. It's very illegal. It's a felony. That plus the fact that the codes are actually pretty toxic and doing a lot of harm right now. I think that kind of stuff can persuade. I mean, it sounds a little bit like a veiled threat to even present the color of law part, but it's true that the codes really do hang out local officials to dry because they have a disclaimer. I mean, it's a body of laws that actually says essentially, yeah, this body of laws guarantees nothing, nothing. So we're not liable. We're not liable for whatever happens if you choose to use these statutes. So that leaves the enforcers on the hook, and I think enforcers are going to. They already are lightening up because the municipalities are seeing the problem. So all we need to do is I don't think we have to push much.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on this. The code there's going to be some code officials and some areas that they just, they're just not going to allow you to do anything. And then there's others that are a little bit easier to talk to, and they could be right next door to each other in cities, and so I know of in Durham, North Carolina, there was a gal that wanted live in her tiny house because she had some mold growing in her big house and she wanted to live in the backyard while she repaired it. And he had the authority to get what's called a special exception to allow her to live in her tiny house. It was a NOAA, so they looked at the video and they looked at everything to make sure that it was safe, and she had to do a few things to make it safe and that kind of thing. But other than that, they gave her a certificate of occupancy to live in that tiny house, and he had full authority. But it was just a one-off, and you don't want to do that every time you got to go do a tiny house. To have, I think the question was, a variance. Variances cost money, and then you may not win. Especially if you have to post it for like 30 days or something, and then neighbors, will look at that posting and say, "Oh no, they can come to the hearing and they can, say their piece." So anyway, it's an uphill battle to do it that way. What is a better way to do it is to get the movement behind it and get the laws, the ordinances put in place so that what you're doing is not illegal but is legal. And we're all about, the reason why I think they started out on wheels was because if code enforcement came and knocked on the door and made you move, you were on wheels and you could move. But right now, I think it's getting much more pressure from people to do that. Go ahead, Jay.
That is true. That is true. I put my first house on wheels partly just to demonstrate how ridiculous the laws are, because it's kind of a ridiculous thing to put one's house on wheels just so you can actually make a safer, better house than code allows for. So it's a bit of a demonstration. It also happens to be a loophole for the way a lot of officials are interpreting local codes, which are derived from the IRC usually. Also, I think it's worth mentioning that preemptive law says that as long as it's safe and efficient, it's legal. This is how a lot of people have lived in tiny houses for decades, including myself. We live in civil disobedience, regardless of any local law. Tiny houses are legal so long as they are truly, and if you look at the code and you read it carefully, this is the most important part of the code, probably. The IRC would say, and a lot of the other codes created by the Code Council say, all, a approvals will be made or not made in accordance with the intent of this code, which is to safeguard health, safety, and general welfare. And it basically just quotes the Constitution. That's how it saves its own ass from being, so that's it's essentially an enforceable body of laws.
All right, next question.
Okay, Ron Stamen wants to know what counties or areas in California are presently tiny house on wheels friendly.
That might be one for you, Robin. don't
I'm
think
telling you
so.
guys, that is not one for me because I know that there are some that are friendly, and the number of counties and local jurisdictions in California are huge. What I can do, I do know of a resource that I can pull from, and Leanne, what we'll do is we'll I'll pull from that resource and see if I can get a more complete list. But like I mentioned earlier, I know Fresno, San Luis Obispo, San Diego, and LA, and a couple more counties and cities have already adopted tiny houses as ADUs. And another county just recently said that you can have your tiny house on wheels built to ANSI 119.5 as a standalone home. It doesn't have to be an accessory dwelling unit. So I'll try to get those cities together and give them to Leanne, unless you know what they might be.
Well, the smartest answer I've ever given to any question is I don't know, but to make that a bit more helpful these days, I'm just saying let go and let Google, because that stuff changes so fast. There may be twice as many places in a week. I don't know. So I think just there must be a Google. There must be some easy to find reference for that online. I'm sure there is. I think I even looked it up recently.
Yeah, I've got some watchdogs that keep an eye on things like that. But those are the ones that have already passed. I don't know which ones, when you say friendly, that they may be friendly, but they still haven't passed any laws. I know in the state of Oregon, they passed some laws, but they're not enforcing the laws. That's kind of friendly too, isn't it? When you don't enforce the law that's there. So
yeah, a lot of the jurisdictions here are just putting a moratorium on the seasonal use RV caveat. They're like, well, you just live in it forever, which is working in the short term.
all right. Next question, Leanne.
Oh, 1 second. I was sending Ron an email. I have a guy, I have something I can send him. Okay, so you guys were talking about the 49 states. KP wants to know what is the state that doesn't, we were talking about tiny house friendly, 49. What's the one that is not?
No, it's there are 49 states that use a derivative of IRC or IRC and IBC and IPC and all the I codes. Basically, National Electric Code, which is NFPA 70, is across the board. Tiny houses, RVs, travel trailers, big homes, mansions are all using National Electric Code. But the 49 states use the IRC, and some of them are on the 2015, some of them are on the 2018, and some of them are on the 2021. Some of them have adopted Appendix Q, some of them have not. Some of them have amendments that go in there, and some of them have not. The one that doesn't, I can't remember. While I'm talking, I'm trying to think of it. I think it starts with a W or M. It's a Wisconsin or a Michigan or one of those.
It's Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Is it Wisconsin? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Upside
you,
down.
Jay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay. All right. That was a long answer to a short question.
All good information.
Okay, lastly, it's just a comment from Matt. When we were talking about composting toilets, he said he has a separate and it's great. Vents outdoors, no smell. Was a little costly, but works really well. So thanks for sharing that.
A little costly, guys, is about $1,000. Somewhere 800, 900, 1,000, somewhere in that range. And they go up higher. Real quick, the different types of toilets that I know of, and there's probably more. There's the composting toilet and that we talked about, the regular flushing toilet. And then you have your RV toilet, which uses less water, but still uses, is a flush type thing. You have your incinerator toilet, which uses a lot of electricity, or unless you get gas, but uses a lot of energy to incinerate everything into ash. And then there's the macerating toilet, which basically grinds everything up and pumps it out. Like if your septic is uphill from where your toilet is, you can get a macerating toilet and it will pump it uphill through an 1.5 PVC line. And that's about all I can come up with, guys, but off the top of my head.
That was good enough.
That's it.
Well, Jay, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Leanne, why don't you wind us out of here and if there's nothing else, and let everybody go at this point.
All right, sounds good. Well, tomorrow night, we have Scott Banta, who is developing a tiny house neighborhood down here in Florida, our neck of the woods. And he'll be our regular guest for the next few Wednesdays, just to talk about everything involved in developing a tiny house community. We have a lot of members that have asked about that and wanting a workshop on that. So hopefully we'll have some good attendance on that. And with that, I'll let you guys go. And thanks for showing up, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for helping, and thank you, Robin, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Jay.
See you next time.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. Take care, everybody. Bye.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.